Hi, everyone. My name is Mariana Hernandez. I am an associate product manager at edX2U. And welcome to our talk, LMS Amplifier, extending the horizons of your platform through automated integrations. Alex?
Yeah, my name is Alex Sheehan. I'm a software engineer for the Enterprise Reach team at edX2U. And we're really excited to talk to you guys about doing some integrations of OpenEdX content into external services.
Awesome. So just to go through our agenda for today, I'll be providing a product introduction, explaining a little bit of what we mean by integrated channels when we say integrated channels, explaining a little bit around why we have such a focus and have made such a big investment on the integrated channels themselves. Alex will then be taking a lengthy technical introduction and walk through around how you all could actually leverage the integrated channels on your own OpenEdX instance. And then we'll be wrapping up with some areas of focus, things that we're thinking about, essentially like what comes next for integrated channels in our minds, and then opening it up to Q&A. So without further ado, I'll be presenting the product introduction. So for anyone that was not at the 2U community introduction, we work on the enterprise theme at edX and 2U. And so what that means is that we work and sell to companies and organizations that are looking to provide edX to their employees, affiliates, or students. And so one of the key factors about the enterprise experience is that learners who have access given to them by their organization or their university really have to understand which courses are available to them at a subsidized rate, and also what that type of timeline looks like. And so in addition to the learner perspective that we have to think about, we also have to solve for the administrator perspective. And so in organizations that are providing learning as a benefit, administrators need to be able to essentially show the return on investment that a corporation is making when providing edX as a benefit or a resource. And so a lot of our focus areas have been not only on understanding and solving for that learner perspective, but also showing and essentially creating tools for the administrators to be able to navigate not only our platform, but also the learner experience. And so we're going to be diving a little deeper into the enterprise experience, specifically talking about integrated channels. And so what we mean when we say integrated channels are the way that we send edX content to an LMS or an LXP. So, if a customer has an instance of Moodle, right, as their LMS, then we are connecting to their Moodle instance and sending courses to them. And so because of the large number of LMSs or LXPs that are used by organizations for a variety of reasons, we found this to be a really important focus area when thinking about enterprise use cases. Something that we've also come to understand and see in the market is that the LMS and LXP space is growing at around 23% annually, and so there is a lot of growth in this particular area. And we have also come to find, both through our own experience and through market research, that organizations and companies realistically leverage multiple vendors for their content. And so it's not a kind of one gets all. There are a lot of corporations that leverage multiple providers. So we think that not only is there a lot of opportunity because of the growth, there's also a ton of opportunity because companies, organizations, and universities are leveraging multiple content providers. And so just to present a real-life example of what we're talking about, you have the enterprise experience, so native on edX for the enterprises on the left-hand side. So you have the learner portal up here, so how learners can view courses that they can access at a subsidized rate by their organization. And then you also have the learner progress report, which administrators use to understand how learners have progressed through courses, have they completed courses, et cetera. And on the right-hand side, you have essentially what we are transmitting In this case, this is Canvas that we've connected to. And so you've got the discovery experience, but you also have the reporting experience. And so Alex will be walking through the technical specifications for how we do this, which, hopefully is our hope, that you will start to adopt and think about ways that you can implement integrated channels in your own instance.
Great. So, first of all, I noticed a couple of people have trickled in. I will one last time point out that all of you are free to follow along on these slides at any point at this URL here that we have written on the board. But to start, this is a technical talk. I will be going into kind of the specifications and the inner workings of the integrated channels. So for those who might not be as familiar with the platform or some of these minute details, we have a glossary of vocabulary here and more of the terms that you might not have seen day to day, or I might mention a couple of times and might not necessarily know fully well. But I won't linger here too long. So I want to step into what is the integrated channels, because as someone who is using an edX or an OpenEdX rather instance and trying to figure out, is this a feature, is this a thing that I want to put into my systems? We define it as the 2 boxes, 3 arrows solution. So we have a box over here, which is our edX instance, but can be really anyone's OpenEdX instance. And then we have our external services on the left. And there's 3 modes of communication that are going on. So first we have our discovery. Next we have access, and then reporting. So what do those 3 things mean? Well, discovery is our way of taking content on an OpenEdX instance and sending it to an external service, such that learners can discover and easily sift through the content in order to figure out exactly what they want to be taking. Access represents the point at which we have a learner come over to the OpenEdX instance, and they're able to seamlessly get access to that content. And then finally, reporting. Reporting comes in when the user starts generating learner data on your instance, and you want to report that data back to the external service. For the sake of this talk, we will be focusing on, excuse me, we will be focusing on discovery and reporting. Access is not quite as involved with the integration and the integrated channels, so for now, we'll just leave that out. But to start, discovery. So like I said, this is the first arrow of our integrations. What exactly does it mean to send this content over? Well, we here have our big box of OpenEdX instance, and you have one or many external services that you want to send them to. So how is this information getting sent over? Well, you need to have the integrated channels installed into your instance. The integrated channels is a part of the enterprise software. So as Mariana so awesomely said and stated, this is a part of the enterprise architecture. You will need, and I will get into this later, but it is required to have the enterprise package installed and the following architecture of users, customers, catalogs that come with that. But it's a little bit more complicated. I hope many of you are familiar with the discovery service and how it serves enterprise, or rather learners on edX and OpenEdX instances. So what we have is a source of truth that will essentially pull the information from the discovery service and house it for the integrated channels to then use and send out to your services. And really what we're doing here is we're running this many times a day, because we need to make sure that the content that is on all of your Moodles, your Canvases, your Blackboards, we need to make sure that that information is up to date. And then also the integrated channels themselves are responsible for a bit of just like data formatting. We need to make sure that the information that comes from that source of truth is properly formatted before it gets sent to the source, the external services. So I mentioned a source of truth. What does that mean? What is that? For us at edX Enterprise, that's the Enterprise Catalog Service. This service essentially sits in between discovery and the integrated channels, it houses relationships between customer catalogs and content. So a customer will subscribe under a catalog. That catalog will contain one or many courses, and essentially those are then assigned to the customer, and we know that that customer will be able to view those courses. We also need to know when this information is updated. It's very important to have this be a time-stamped model. We need to know when we get new updates to the content, when new courses are added to the catalogs, and when old courses are taken away. Now, this service, right now the Enterprise Catalog service, what it needs to do for the integrated channels is it needs to hold a couple of endpoints that allow us in the integrated channels to create the buckets of what do we need to create, delete, and update. And we will get that into a sec. But right now, I had just an arrow here. And we're going to zoom in a little bit because it's a little bit more complicated than just a simple arrow. Specifically, we have two endpoints. So one, the source of truth needs to surface the get catalog diff endpoint, which is responsible for taking a bucket of content keys, essentially the keys that belong to a catalog, and it generates, like I said, the 3 different buckets that we need with those content keys. So if you imagine a catalog has course A, B, and C, right? And we know that we've sent A, B, and C to your external service. In the future, you then have B, C, D, right? So the integrated channels will send A, B, C because that's what it knows exists right now on the customer's instance, or the external service, rather. And the catalog service has the records of, also wait, okay, this is a little bit more information, sorry about that. The catalog service has the information of B, C, D. So it's able to tell, well, you sent me A, but I no longer have A, so that's going to go into our bucket of no longer being in the customer's catalog. You didn't send me D, so I'm going to tell you that D needs to be created, but you did send me B and C. So I need to tell you when the last time B and C were updated, such that you can request the information on those courses to update it to your external service. If the time that it has been updated comes before the last time that we sent that information to the customer, no work's needed. We don't really have to do anything with it. So this wasn't always, and this is just, I have to talk a little bit about some of the improvements that we've made to this system. This wasn't always the case. Originally, it was the responsibility of the integrated channels to be generating these diffs. And what it would do is it would request the entire catalog of courses of that customer and then generate those buckets from that information using the records. And what we realized was we were essentially just creating a copy of the enterprise catalog service, which is already a copy of the discovery service. It seemed like extraneous work. Additionally, it meant that we had to make larger API calls to this service than were necessarily needed because we were only seeing a handful of courses be updated every single time we called it, but it required us to fetch the information on every single course, every single piece of content. So, moving on. We're going to mention, and we have mentioned a few times, we have several different channels already created and integrated with. These include Canvas, Blackboard, Moodle, Degreed, and so on and so forth. If you are an OpenEdX instance user or creator, provider, and you want to be integrating with an external service that you don't necessarily see here presented today, that's okay, because the way the integrated channels were constructed was off of base classes that are easily subclassed into new channels. Each class is almost identical with just small little minute details that are required of the external service in terms of, oh, it needs to hit this specific endpoint because Canvas is slightly different than Blackboard, or the data is actually, they don't call them courses, they call them like experiences or something. So we need to be able to differentiate between all of those, and the subclassing method that we've implemented makes adding new ones much easier. So now we get into people's favorite part, the code. Specifically, when we are sending content metadata to external services, there's two large steps involved. The first is the exporter. So what the exporter does is it gathers our content keys from our tables within the integrated channels. It requests that diff that I was just talking about from your source of truth. And then it fetches and formats the content metadata from that source of truth. So that was that second line that you saw when we did the Spy Kids zoom in, which is essentially just saying, hey, I want to know what this course looks like right now so that I can send it to our external service. So this is all the job of the integrated channels content metadata exporter. The exporter then leads straight into the transmitter. And the transmitter's responsibility is taking that information that the exporter had to gather, format, and prepare, and it sends it to your external service. So we see it's passing along create, delete, and update payloads. It's making API requests to generate the course discovery content. And then once it's done, we need to be sure that we're recording success and failures, because those records are what allow us to make future updates. All right, that was a lot of code, a lot of just like random stuff. So I'm going to take a quick breather, but we're actually going to now skip over access because access is more of an SSO infrastructure. It deals with IDP configs and is about allowing the users to come over. The integrated channels really is more in the reporting. So we're going to step into the reporting part of the process, which is once you have learners coming from your external service, they're going to start generating learner data on your OpenEdX instance. And we want to be able to take that data and send it out to those services so that teachers and administrators can view how their students and learners are doing. So we're going to more code. I'm sorry, but it has to happen. Specifically, learner data can be broken up into two different tracks. So one, we want to know when the learners complete their course. It's important to know course completion, what percentage of the course is required in order to complete it, or be considered completed, rather. But then we also want more real-time reporting. So that's why we added assessment reporting to the learner data transmission. So not only are learners getting their learner data sent over once they complete the course, but once they complete each individual subsection, we'll take this information and make sure that it's sent to the external service. It can also be broken down in two more subsections, which are our signal-based individual transmissions and then our schedule-based bulk transmissions. What this means is that we have put in Django signals into the grade factories of OpenEdX, or rather the edX and the OpenEdX instances, that will fire off jobs to run these transmissions once the learner generates that grade. And these transmissions are specific to that learner, meaning it's only the learner's data that's getting sent over. Now, we also have these scheduled bulk-based transmissions, which essentially act as a catch-all that will make sure that all information under the customer is sent. And if anything goes wrong with these single learner ones, say, network's down, there's a bug shipped, I don't know who would do that, but we need to make sure that these are then accounted for and that we send them over to the customer. And these are run all entirely on a schedule. The schedule is specific to edX. We've decided kind of intervals, and it's up to you as an implementer to choose how often you want to be making these calls and how confident you are in the single learner transmissions. Back to code, I'm sorry. So similar to the discovery system that we have implemented, the learner data also has an exporter. This exporter is responsible for gathering our enrollments under the customer. It determines the status of the received grade for that enrollment, and it fetches the specific grade data from the grade API, and then, got a little covered there, I'm sorry. But it generates the record in the database without saving it, because it's a convenient way for us to package up the learner information, the grade that they have generated, and then further on in the process, and we'll get to it in just a sec, but we'll eventually save this and make sure that it's recorded for future transmissions. So speaking of which, we next have the learner data transmitter and clients. So very much so similar to the way that we handled the discovery process. We have a transmitter that's responsible for serializing the data that is within that the transmission audit package. We send that information over, and then we make sure that it's saved at the very end. And like I said, this is the saving part is quite important because we need to be able to make sure that the learner's grade that they generated needs updating. So one more breather, and I'm sorry, this is the last time. A lot of code, and I would like to now step into, I think, everyone's favorite topic, right? Say it with me. Importance of record keeping. Yes, okay, so I mentioned this a couple of times in this presentation, but it's really important that we are tracking this information, and that's one of the largest responsibilities of the integrated channels. So each type of transmission has its own specific table with the necessary columns that we need in order to track the updates and necessary creates and deletes. So we have them listed here just for clarity's sake, but we can see that in these tables we have pairings of content keys and catalog UUIDs. We have date times of last transmissions. We also have content metadata JSONified in order to better surface debugging for debugging purposes, logs, and whatnot. We need to be able to just quickly tell what has been sent. On the learner data side, we have lookups by enrollment ID. So we need to know, hey, this enrollment has been sent or not. We have the grades that were sent under that enrollment. And then if it's an assessment, we save the subsection ID as well. I think it's pretty obvious why. So in terms of, this is a feature and infrastructure that was built for edX Enterprise. And right now is set up to transmit given enterprise customers and enterprise learners. So I'm hopefully here to convince you all that it's completely possible to get this system up and running for your individual OpenEdX instances. And it's really not that difficult. But we do need to account for a couple of things. One, we need a method of scheduling. So like I said, we've worked out some optimal times that we've figured are best to be sending these transmissions. I believe the content metadata is sent fairly frequently throughout the day, whereas learner data transmissions are scheduled, at least the bulk ones are scheduled daily because it's less important. We're fairly confident in the fact that our single learner transmissions are getting through to the customer. We also need enterprise users. This is a little bit more broad, but like I mentioned earlier, there is some edX enterprise infrastructure that's required. This involves enterprise customers, enterprise learners, enterprise catalogs, and then for those customers to be assigned to catalogs. And the integrated channels relies on these relationships between content, catalogs, and customers in order to send our information. You also need content. If you don't have anything on your OpenEdX instance, what are you going to send? And then lastly, we have a series of configurations. And these configurations are important because they're the key to allowing us to send this information to the external services. They involve things like refresh tokens, API keys, passwords, specifics on the customer's instance, like base URLs, reporting URLs, and whatnot. If you were around for some of the edX2U product introductions, the team has been making a lot of efforts to self-service this, allow users to quickly and easily enter in the information required for these configurations in just a series of micro front ends. It is very specific to edX, so as a new consumer of this project, there will be some, you will need to have some consideration in order to best figure out, how to get those customers' configurations in. So I've now talked at you for a little while. I'm going to try and take the pace down just a sec and walk you through like what exactly it looks like to be generating content on your OpenEdX instance, having that content discovery exported to an external service, having learners come over, generate grade data on that content, and then lastly, having that grade data sent over. So if you're lucky and have access to edX Stage, you will see a great course I created called Intermediate Happiness. It has a big fuzzy bear and exactly one gradable assignment, which is, I think, did you enjoy this course? With the only right answer being yes. But I have this piece of content created, and you can kind of put your shoes, yourself in my shoes here for generating content on your OpenEdX instance. We need to link this piece of content to a customer. So specifically, and this is a bit easier said than done than just this one picture here, but this is to represent that we have in our source of truth, or the enterprise catalog service, we have linked my int happy 101 to a customer catalog, and this customer catalog is assigned to whatever customer I want to be sending this out to. This involves also generating the enterprise customer on the OpenEdX instance side with the installed edX enterprise package. It involves generating the catalog and whatnot. But we need this link in order to start reporting it. So I have gone in and I have added this information to the catalog service and made sure that the customer is generated. I am now going to configure my customer. So here we have a screenshot of the Django admin form. This is the existing way to enter in your customer configurations. Like I said, it's entirely possible to self-service this, but you will need to figure that out on your own. Then we're going to transmit this data. So we have this management command, this convenient management command, transmit content metadata. And we're going to do exactly what we just learned about a little while ago, which is we're going to make sure the exporter receives the create payload. So at the time of running this command with my newly generated course, the integrated channels will not have sent anything. So when it hits that catalog diff endpoint, it will, the source of truth will report, hey, you have a new piece of content under that catalog, so it needs to be generated in the external service. The exporter will then request that piece of content's metadata from the source of truth. It will format that content metadata into a shape that is acceptable by our external service, which is Canvas up here. And then lastly, it will send that information over to the transmitter. And the transmitter will take that packaged piece of content, throw it through our API client, and send it over to the customer, which is this Canvas service. Next, and we have our little access arrow here, we want learners from that external service to come over to my newly created course, a piece of content on the OpenEdX instance, and we want them to start generating grades. So they're going to answer my one question. They're going to tell me they love my course, and they're going to trip the signal. They're going to trip the signal in the grades factory, which will go over to the signal receiver and fire off the transmit learner data job. And much like the discovery step, the exporter will fetch the enrollment. So it will say whatever learners in this step generated that piece of learner data, they have an associated enrollment object, which has an ID. So under the customer, we'll fetch that enrollment. We will then see that we have not sent any information for that learner. There will be no grade saved in our table. We will request the grade data from the grades API. We'll serialize the grade data and then send that serialized data to our API clients, which will forward the information to our external service. And we have an image here, and you might recognize some of these because they were shown earlier by my wonderful associate. But now we see that we have a reported grade in Canvas for this learner that was taking the course on your OpenEdX instance. So next up, we really want to talk just a little bit about what we're doing here today, why we're coming to you, why we're making this open and available, and hopefully all of you aware of this awesome feature.
Yeah, and so we've highlighted here 3 areas of focus that our team and the enterprise theme in general have towards the integrated channels. First being, we have 6 integrated channels that we can connect to natively. And so with that, there are a lot of LMS and LXP providers, and there will likely be more. And so we get requests fairly frequently to add additional channels that could natively integrate. And so that's something that we will continue to kind of take a look at and figure out what makes sense from a market perspective. But it's something that we think could definitely be an area of opportunity for the greater OpenEdX community.
Totally. And I mentioned a base class for the integrated channels that makes it easier to implement new ones. There are specifics to this that were designed for the enterprise team and the enterprise features. And we would love contributions that help make this more broadly applicable to the open source community. Being able to decouple some of these features and systems from the enterprise-specific ways, and allowing people to come in and really use and plug this into their OpenEdX instances seamlessly is really important. And like I said, plugging it in. I've now mentioned many times a source of truth or the enterprise catalog service. These endpoints that the integrated channels are reliant on are fairly baked in. So if you were to build your own, you would need to at least copy by name a lot of these endpoints that are available, and then the information that we have stored in there as well. We would love to have this be more generic and more reliant on any source of truth. Why would you need an enterprise catalog service if you just simply want to service your content to external services? So ways in which that we can more easily rely on a generic source of truth is certainly a great point that we want to be iterating on in the future, and we're hoping that the open source community would be able to iterate on.
Awesome. So, if you are interested and this conversation has been of interest, we're more than excited. We're actually pretty excited to, answer any questions. If, you have to think on it a little bit and you have more questions after this conference is over, we're more than happy to engage on the OpenEdX Slack instance under the enterprise channel. And then we have linked in this deck some of the repositories that Alex was diving into for this conversation.
So specifically, those are OpenEdX/enterprise catalog and OpenEdX/edX enterprise. So at this point, I think we would love to open it up to some Q&A. I see we already have a question over there.
Thank you. Is there any particular reason why OpenEdX is not part of the list of integrated channels that are available as an external LMS?
So I think it was really kind of born out of our customer needs and what we were getting requests for. That's something that's come up a lot, and we've been really interested in doing. Was, I think, more of a product of, we're servicing content from edX, and we had a lot of interest from users who had Moodle, Canvas, SAP, Cornerstone platforms, and so that's where the effort went into to begin with. But you make a great point. We've talked about it many times, and it would be wonderful to see something like that. I think it also opens up a lot of questions in terms of you have a discovery service, right? But really what we're trying to do is bring the learners to the original source, the original OpenEdX instance. And so what does that exactly mean when you're going from an OpenEdX instance to an OpenEdX instance? And are we discovering, are we migrating content and such? Great question.